Okay, so we're both in Milwaukee. We're both at the Republican National Convention. And as I was walking around last night, this question popped into my head, which was, is a political convention more like a pep rally or like a multi-day music festival where instead of headline musical acts, there are politicians? What do you think?
I would say I think it's more like a telethon. Like this stuff is so combed. Like I would love to have been around in the 1950s and 60s when this stuff like actually mattered and you didn't know what was going to happen and people were arguing about who the nominee should be. You know, we always fantasize about this idea of an open convention. Like let's
the
go back.
political nerds fantasize. I should say.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe not the American people, but yes, let's go back to that. Even just like for a fun exercise that doesn't actually mean anything.
You want like Model UN?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes, I love Model UN. Let's do that.
Okay.
Yes. Welcome to The Campaign Moment. I'm Aaron Blake, senior political reporter and author of the Campaign Moment newsletter.
And I'm Laura Benshoff, the producer of the Campaign Moment podcast.
We're here at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. It's Tuesday, July 16th.
And we're bringing you a special episode.
Yeah. Today, we're going to break down three big takeaways from the first night of the Republican National Convention and what they tell us about the somewhat interesting ways in which the Republican Party is trying to sell itself right now. The first big moment happened around 9 p.m. Central Time when Donald Trump walked out onto the convention floor. It's his first big appearance since an assassination attempt at a rally Saturday in Pennsylvania.
He is here tonight to show his courage.
That's Lee Greenwood speaking as Trump walks into the venue at the Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee.
You will not take this man down. He has the courage, the strength, and he will be the next president of the United States.
Trump really took his time as he was walking in. He showed up with a bandage on his right ear, which was a big white bandage, which would have been visible to all the delegates who were gathered there. It was really kind of a drawn-out moment that was clearly intended to get people emotional, get people excited. It came after we saw a few references to the assassination attempt in earlier speeches. It wasn't a huge focus, but I think they left it for this moment to kind of really drive that home.
So they left it for him to kind of own that moment.
Yeah, and what was really interesting about it was Trump at least appeared to be moved, and he looked like he was kind of emotional as he was walking out. He was, nodding
hugging
at
people
and raising his hand and kind of being a little bit subdued. This is a president who, of course, knows how to put on a show. I'm recalling when he came back from his COVID experience and he showed up at the White House and went up on
the balcony, right?
Yeah, took his mask off and it was very demonstrative. And this was very much in the same vein. Clearly a moment that is going to be a takeaway from this entire convention.
That makes a lot of sense.
So that was one moment where the assassination attempt was really front and center. Another big moment was Senator Tim Scott bringing this up, one of the few speakers to actually reference this. And he talked about the idea that the devil showed up in Pennsylvania.
The devil?
The devil. I mean,
wow. Okay.
Our God still saves, he still delivers, and he still sets free. Because on Saturday, the devil came to Pennsylvania holding a rifle, but an American lion got back up on his feet and he roared.
I mean, this is a theme of the idea that God was there protecting Trump that day, and this has been something that Republicans are talking about a lot. And this was a moment that the crowd really ate up.
Oh, yeah! He roared!
Aaron, what was your next big takeaway from last night?
The other thing that is somewhat related to this is how the Republican Party is going to craft its message moving forward. There has been a talk, at least, about a more unifying message, one that's less angry, basically kind of moving away from the doom and gloom rhetoric that often characterizes Trump's speeches.
I have a question about that, actually.
Yeah.
Was that talk of unity happening before the assassination attempt?
No, it's very much something that was after that. They decided that was the way to respond to this. And we saw during the convention some uneven attempts to get at this. Earlier in the evening, we saw Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin talk about how Democrats' policies were a clear and present danger.
Democrats have forgotten American families. They have abandoned the hardworking middle class. But with President Trump and Republicans, those forgotten Americans are forgotten no more.
And afterwards, Ron Johnson told reporters that this was not the speech that he was supposed to give. Basically, he said that an earlier version of it, apparently from before the assassination attempt, had been loaded onto the teleprompter. And that's the speech that he gave. He was intending to give one that was more about unity and things like that. I also think another good example of this is Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman from Georgia. She went up on stage and attacked Democrats for not unifying the country, but then turned around and went after Democrats for being warmongers. And she went after them for celebrating Transgender Day of Visibility. We can listen to that here.
They promised unity and delivered division. They promised peace and brought war. They promised normalcy and gave us Transgender Visibility Day on Easter Sunday.
This is a good example of how hard it is to have a more unifying message. And I mentioned on the podcast yesterday about the idea that everybody's version of unity is uniting around them.
Right.
And so
Come to
for
my
her,
side.
for her to say, we're unifying, and then to talk about how Democrats are bringing war and, attacking Transgender Visibility Day on Easter Sunday, which, by the way, was a coincidence. That wasn't something the White House did on its own. It just kind of gets at how the need to drive a political message is not conducive to any kind of a real unifying message.
Super interesting.
And we should have expected this going in, that it was not going to be a kumbaya moment for the country, because Donald Trump is somebody who often divides people and does so purposefully. Yeah,
the word I keep hearing people use when they describe him as a fighter, when you talk to people here.
Yeah, the guy, he stood up right after the assassination attempt and said, fight, fight, fight. This is his mode. This is what defines him as a politician. And he's going to go after his opponents. And it's not going to be always a pretty thing. And it's not always going to be a unifying thing.
Right.
Let's take a quick break and let's come back and talk about one more moment that struck me on Monday night. Also, what's to come at the convention this week. We'll be right back.
Okay, Aaron, what's your last big takeaway from the first night of the Republican National Convention?
The other thing that I think was really interesting is that the Republican Party tried to change its brand, or at least appeal to different groups of voters. We saw this earlier in the day with the selection of a very populist vice presidential running mate.
J.D. Vance.
Yeah, who's very non-interventionist on foreign policy, very skeptical of corporate power. And then in the evening program, we saw 4 of the 5 Black Republican members of Congress speaking on the stage.
Plus the model and TV personality, Amber Rose.
Correct, exactly.
I have seen people talk about Amber Rose's speech specifically as being dangerous for Democrats because she makes a pitch for her own conversion to aligning with the Republican Party. And I actually just want to play a little bit of that.
The first person I knew who supported Donald Trump was my father. I was shocked. My entire family is racially diverse. And I believed the left-wing propaganda that Donald Trump was a racist. My father said, "No, he's not, Amber. What are you talking about?" And when I insisted, he said, "Prove it." So to prove my father wrong, I did my research and looked into all things Donald Trump.
And she goes on to say, she discovered that the GOP is the party of love, that they accept everyone. And she makes a case for why, she personally now aligns with the modern Republican Party.
Yeah, I think there is certainly the school of thought in the Republican Party for featuring her on Monday night was that it would appeal to new groups of voters. Trump loves when he gets support from prominent celebrities, from Black people who have converted to supporting him. J.D. Vance is one of those people who once upon a time didn't support Trump. And so he likes to put these people out there because, as that clip that we just played says the idea that people were wrong about Trump and believed things that were wrong, and then they've come around. Like, Trump needs that in this election. And so I don't know how many votes this is going to move. You know, there's a school of thought that this could appeal to young people who know who she is and like her, you know. But I think maybe the more interesting thing was the decision to give the final big speaking slot of the night to the Teamsters president, Sean O'Brien, who went on to deliver not an endorsement of Donald Trump, but a very anti-corporate speech to the Republican National Convention, the likes of which you wouldn't have seen at a previous Republican convention.
Yeah, let's hear a little bit of that really quickly.
You know what I see? An American worker being taken for granted. Workers being sold out to big banks, big tech, corporates, and the elite. And I'm not the only one who sees this.
I mean, the people in the venue didn't seem to know what to do with it. I think it's important to note that a lot of these Republican delegates come from the business world. You know, they're not necessarily union members. It's discordant with a lot of where the Republican Party has been for a lot of years. It's discordant with a lot of Trump's policies, which are very friendly to corporations. And I think the other thing that was striking here was the timing of the speech. It was so late in the program during prime time when people were tuned in. It was a very long speech. And as I mentioned, there was not an endorsement in this speech.
Like, he didn't say, and you should vote for Donald Trump?
No. Sean O'Brien has kind of left this out there as, you know, he's kind of, you might actually speak at the Democratic National Convention too. He's asked to do that. To give him this kind of billing at such a kind of crucial time without an endorsement, and to have this message that was not really in keeping with how the Republican Party has been on these issues for a while is a very interesting decision. And I think it's in certain ways similar to the decision to give Amber Rose a platform shortly before he spoke. Amber Rose is someone whose views on sexuality and social justice, and, you know, there was one thing where she's talking about how Satanism is actually a good thing in certain ways. Those are not...
She said that last night.
No, she did not say that last night, but before.
I was like,
no, if she had said that on the stage of the convention, that would be something.
I was like, I missed that.
Yeah, there are things that are very much not in keeping with where the conservative portion of the Republican Party has been for a very long time. I think it's obvious that Republicans are trying to appeal to new groups by featuring peoples like this. They want to get more black voters in the Republican Party. There are signs there are starting to appeal to more black voters in the polls. They want to get more union members on board. There are signs that union members are moving a little bit towards the Republicans in 2024. But you are also risking alienating the people in your party who have very different priorities than these people you're inviting on stage. Yeah. And a lot of the delegates didn't seem to know what to make of these people who were being invited to speak at the most crucial hour of the first night of the Republican National Convention. You know, I think there are moments in which there's some tension in there that maybe isn't what the party wants at a convention.
I mean, but on the other hand, a lot of Republicans have stuck with Donald Trump, despite his message not being the traditional Republican message, despite him not cutting a figure that a traditional Republican politician cuts. So
yeah, and we're seeing that this week with the party not really having a big conversation about the abortion portion of its platform being watered down. This is a party that is in Trump's image. People trust him to the extent that he decides to put Amber Rose on the stage and Sean O'Brien on the stage. It's likely that the vast majority of people are going to support that. But it is a pretty striking moment where Republicans are putting forward these very non-traditional people that you wouldn't generally see at a convention, not necessarily endorsing him too, just kind of another key moment in the very strange era that has been the Trump era.
So what are you looking forward to tonight? It's Tuesday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are the next big nights of the convention.
Yeah, speaking of people who could draw a mixed reaction from the crowd, Nikki Haley is set to speak after saying all manner of ugly things about Donald Trump during the primaries and kind of begrudgingly coming around to endorsing him a couple of months ago. So it's going to be really interesting to see what she says in her speech and also what the reaction is to her. We saw yesterday Mitch McConnell get booed pretty lustily when he introduced the Kentucky delegation. And so there are still these divisions in the Republican Party. I imagine we're going to see a few of them on Tuesday night.
And we'll both be watching to see what happens. But for now, I think that's a wrap.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Aaron.
Laura Benshoff is an audio producer for The Post, and I'm Aaron Blake, senior political reporter. If you want more original, deep analysis of campaign news, subscribe to my newsletter, also called The Campaign Moment. You can find a link in our show notes and at postreports.com. And if you don't already, make sure to subscribe to the Campaign Moment podcast feed for more great episodes like this one. Find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Today's episode was produced by Laura Benshoff and Charla Freeland. It was mixed by Sam Bair. It was edited by Lucy Perkins and Mary Jo Murphy. Thanks also to Trinity Webster-Bass. We'll see you later this week.